Peace and love, this is Brother Faheem, and you are now tuned in to the Lead with Logic podcast. You know the vibes. Peace, 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 peace. Peace, 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 peace. Listen. Welcome. This is Brother Faheem. Welcome to another episode of the Lead with Logic podcast. Man, life moves at such a fast pace. I try to keep my boots laced so that I can ultimately win the race, man. Hopefully, you guys are having such a great Monday, a good start of your week. You know, the weather wherever you are, hopefully it's getting warm. It's certainly getting warm where I am. It's still a little bit back and forth. You know, it's pretty inclement weather, but we hope it gets better. Welcome. Listen, y'all come on in. Give me a second. Give me a quick second. We got a nice show with y'all today. A little bit of historical, a little bit of political, a little bit of financial issues that we're going to discuss today because man, we have so much that's been going on in the world and things that are affecting us. And so I thought I would come and discuss a little bit of international, a couple of geopolitics, a couple of issues that we saw over the last week. While I now invite you guys, right? We understand that and I'm pulling this up because I want to make sure that I get you guys exactly exactly what it was that we saw, right? So we recently just had a meeting between Ukrainian President, who's our ally, Vladimir, I think that's how you say his name, Zelensky, right? And he met with President Donald Trump, and President and Vice President JD Vance. Everything was going pretty good, y'all. It was going pretty well up until about the last 10 minutes. That's when things got kind of intense. They got kind of turbulent. If we were on a plane, it got kind of shaky, y'all. And if you've been watching CNN, MSNBC, C-SPAN is what I love because C-SPAN is like neutral ground, y'all. C-SPAN always reports just the facts. It's no commentary. It's no leaning toward either side. It's merely just the facts for you to now go do your research and for you to make up your own mind. But it's one person on here. Listen, whoever you are, wherever you are, if you can, jump into the comments. Let me know who you are. But what we saw was we saw again President Trump, Vice President JD Vance, and we saw Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Uh, we saw it get out of hand, way out of hand, and it is pretty. People are pretty divided, right? Um, I when you read different articles, people are saying different things, right? I'm looking at an article now and I'm gonna show it to you. It never should have happened. Americans frustrated by Trump. Zelensky spat. We see around the world, different leaders have commented, different spectators are giving their take on what this means. And different scholars also are discussing what the implications of this fallout could be, right? Now, the black community, a lot of people that I talk to are like, listen, this is This is a spat between world leaders that has nothing to do with us. And I understand that perspective, but now it does have something to do with us because we are involved and we are thoroughly integrated and we are thoroughly included and we participate at all levels of American culture, right? One being in the military, being armed service, myself having been a prior military member. We are absolutely all in the military forces, whether it's the Coast Guard, whether it's the Army, Marine Corps, the Navy, uh, or the mighty Air Force. That's what I was in, or the mighty Air Force. And so, you know, also being a Black American that pays taxes, these monies that are divvied out, monies that are extolled and given away to different countries, whether it's people inside of America or it's countries that are outside of America. This all plays a part, right? We understand and we see where different items and different goods, inflation has elevated, right? Geopolitics, international relations, all of these things play a huge role in those small intangibles. And so, you know, it used to be a saying about Black America surviving economically. If Wall Street gets a cold, the Black community gets the flu. And so, in the same vein as that, we absolutely will be uh, affected by this thing one way or the other. But I just want to show a couple clips, read a few articles, and give my take because, you know, I have my own perspective, and I'll give it to you guys. And here in just a quick second. Listen, it is two of us now. We are army of two. Uh, and you guys know what to do, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. If you're on Facebook, please repost the space. If you are on YouTube, look, grab that link, copy it, send it out to 10, 20 of your friends, right? The more the merrier. Also, I want to say this. Not only should you watch the videos, like and subscribe to the Lead with Logic podcast, you should also go to, and I'm going to put it in the chat, www.leadwithlogic7.com. www.leadwithlogic7.com. Right? Leadwithlogic7.com. Listen, we got nice hoodies like this, right? The Lead with Logic, the Sunshine Peach hoodie with the peaches. We got hats. I'm always rocking. Right? Yeah. So, oh yeah, I'm Lead with Logic. Hey, listen, teas as well. Yeah, we got the Lead with Logic hoodie right here as well. The t-shirt. So you got to stay repping your own. Yeah, man. We got it all. So leadwithlogic7.com. The link is in the chat, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, yes. So what I'm going to do is I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to give the people a little something, keep you guys occupied so we can get a little bit of back history. I'm going to try to give a little bit of history, right? I'm going to let another podcaster give a rundown of exactly what it is that we're dealing with while I bring more people in. This podcaster that I'm going to allow to give you a quick rundown, so not too um not too long. Valuetainment, right? I forget my man's name. I forget his name, but I listen to him. He has a variation of people on his show, right? He has entertainers, he has political figures, he has authors, he has businessmen, right? He has all of these people, right? He has a lot of these people on. But I want to share what he said because he kind of gets into this a little bit, right? So I'm gonna start off by giving you guys just a little bit of history as to what's going on and how we got here because to understand where we are today, you have to understand where we were and where we, or where we came from, right? And so, yes. So yeah, check this out. This is Valuetainment. He does a brief synopsis of how we got here, right? I'm gonna let you guys check this out while I'm bringing more of you in here. Patrick Bet David, here he is. The history of Russia and Ukrainian conflict explained, because that's essentially when you're dealing with this spat, it's good to know the backstory, right? It's good to know how we got here. It's good to know where all the tension is stemming from, right? The who's, the whens, the whys. He's going to go over this real fast for you. Y'all keep up.
A lot of worry about Russia, Ukraine, World War III, because Biden said, hey, you can use long-range missiles against Russia, and then Ukraine, they did. And then Putin comes out and sends the hypersonic missiles without any nuclear weapons in it. But if he did, what does that look like? How quickly does it go? And the argument is very weird, because both sides will say things like, well, Russia didn't hold their end of their bargain when we, in 1991, the Budapest Agreement, when we gave them the 1,700 nuclear weapons that were left in Ukraine, we said we will give this back over to you as long as you no longer attack us and you give us security, and they didn't hold their end of their bargain. But then the other side is like, well, wait a minute. You also told us you're never going to join NATO, but now you are. But to fully understand this, we have to, one, see the people that say, no, Putin's the reason to blame. It's all his fault. We have to see their arguments. And no, NATO and Ukraine is the reason. And then we also got to look at the timeline of what the history looks like, what events took place, what different negotiations happened in the past. And then when you look at this, you're kind of like, whoa, I don't know if I agree with those guys. And I don't know about this. We're going to talk about all that stuff today. If you value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Keep in mind, we're going to go through a timeline on what happened. Some of the stuff we'll talk about, you'll agree with some of the stuff you won't. But again, that's the whole purpose of this commentary. We'll even look at the map of how Russia grew the last 300-400 years since 1600s, and what they owned, what they lost, what happened, all of that stuff. We'll go through it as well. But to go back through history, the most important thing to know is the fact that most of modern Ukraine was under Russia or Soviet control roughly 337 years, from 1667 to 1991, and approximately 90.76% of modern Ukraine history was under Russian or Soviet control. We're talking 91%, give or take. However, on December 1st, 1991, over 90% of Ukrainians voted for independence in a nationwide referendum, reflecting widespread domestic support. And keep in mind, this is the time where Ronald Reagan, you hear the stories about the fact that, hey, Russia, look at you. Everybody drives the same car. They live in the same apartment. There's no competition. Nothing's taking place. Here's what you need to be doing. And there was an NGO that Reagan was one of the founders, I think in 1983, called the National Endowment for Democracy, that was started in early 80s. And they're going on saying free speech, free market, civil society, rule of law. Gorbachev was watching saying, maybe it's not a bad idea. And in 1990, Gorbachev accepted Germany's reunification and its continued membership in NATO under the explicit condition that NATO would not expand past Germany. NATO says you don't have to worry about it, even to the point that U.S. Secretary of State Jim Baker, German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher made verbal assurances, I give you my word, verbal assurances to Mikhail Gorbachev in February of 1990. Baker was famously known for saying that NATO would move not 1 inch eastward, beyond Germany. So imagine you're Russia, you're Gorbachev, we made a great deal. Hey guys, let's make this work, totally fine. We're willing to accept capitalism. We're willing to accept some of the democracy, Western way of living. We'll take it, but let's make a deal. Yeah, listen, you ain't got to worry about it. We're going to be okay. This is what we're going to do. And then later on, it changed. Now, keep this in mind. When you're saying not 1 inch eastward, look at the map now. not 1 inch eastward of Germany. Look who now they expanded to. What do you think you're going to be thinking about if you're Russia? What's Russia's priority? Russia. So you just made a deal, and then you're looking at this map saying, hey, guys, what the hell are you doing? Well, what happened to Margaret Thatcher, Jim Baker? What happened to Kohl? What happened to the German chancellor? All these promises.
That's huge. That's huge, y'all. I'm still sending out notifications, but that is big. What he's saying right now. Listen, the deal was made, even though it was a verbal agreement, it was a deal made like, hey, look, we will not transgress. We will not move into your. This is NATO he's talking about. NATO's telling Russia, we won't move on. We won't encroach upon your land. That's big.
What is this all about? Right? So this is where it's like, well, maybe these guys are not keeping their word. Now, let's go back again, 1991. The Chicken Kiev speech refers to an address by President Bush, George H.W. Bush, on August 1st, 91, set to Supreme Soviet Union of the Ukrainian SSR in Kiev. In the speech, Bush cautioned against suicidal nationalism. Hey, guys, Ukraine, it's a suicide. If you want to kind of talk about Ukrainian nationalism, you've been part of these guys for all these years, but this is a suicide mission you're on. You sure you want to do this? You don't want to do it. We want to do it. Are you positive? We want to do it. It's a suicide mission you're on. They're going to come after eventually. No, we're going to do it. That's the warning that Bush gave to them at that time. And I keep in mind, the timing of this is interesting because this is August 1st, 91. And then December 1st, 91, 3 months later, over 90% of Ukrainians voted. So think about the timing. He's saying, you may not want to do this, this whole nationalism, because in Ukraine at the time, they had the Azov battalion, which part of it they had built that was the Nazi symbol with the wolf sign. We've seen these before in documentaries. He's saying, guys, you're making a mistake. Do not do this. He's warning them. Shortly after that, we're talking exactly 19 days later, on December 20th, Boris Yeltsin in 91 writes a letter after the dissolution of Soviet Union. He sent a letter to NATO suggesting that Russia was open to the idea of joining the alliance. Think about this. Russia is open to joining the alliance. Yeltsin framed the request as part of Russia's effort to foster closer relations with the West and to establish itself as a democratic nation. Now, the obvious question will be, what did NATO say? Well, NATO is not going to respond to them. They didn't. They're like, oh, okay, cool. That's nice of you to want to do this. But if we kind of do this, we built NATO specifically to go against you. If you now join us, now we're not needed. If we're not needed, what are we going to do with military-industrial complex? That's a big business model, making billions of dollars. Peace is not a good business model if you're selling weapons. Why would we want peace? Don't tell anybody this. Let's just kind of let this thing go. We know Yeltsin's trying to get some peace stuff going over here. No. NATO was shut down. Then what happens? A lot of people didn't want that. Now, keep in mind, when 1991 was going on, that whole nuclear weapons that we talked about that Ukraine had leads to the Budapest Memorandum 1994, in which Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons in exchange for security guarantees from Russia, UK, and US. And at the time, when Ukraine declared independence of Soviet Union in 1999, it inherited the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, 1,700 nuclear warheads for intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and strategic bombers. They gave it back. They just said, make sure you protect us. Again, this is the part where they go back and forth. Fast forward 2 years later, Ukraine writes their first post-Soviet constitution in 96 with the help of US. Then again in 2000, similar to what Yeltsin said, 9 years prior to that, Putin comes out and says, look, in an interview with BBC, they would consider joining NATO if it were treated as an equal partner. However, this was more of a rhetorical statement to gauge NATO's willingness to engage with Russia on equal terms rather than a formal proposal. Now, here's what's interesting. There's a clip of Tucker interviewing Putin where Putin explains, when Clinton was here right next door, I asked him, I said, hey, what do you think about the idea of us joining NATO? He said, that's an interesting idea. Let me talk to my team. Then they go and he talks to his team and they come back and says, no, not right now. Maybe later on. That's a conversation that took place between Clinton and Putin that he talked about on Tucker. So even though he may have been interested, NATO was not interested in having Russia join NATO. Why? It's a fair question for you to ask. Why wouldn't they want him to join NATO? Would it eliminate the idea of NATO? What would happen there? Again, moving along with the timeline. This is 2000. He's asking to join NATO. Then 9/11 happens, which is a year and a half later. When that takes place, Putin comes out publicly, being one of the first leaders to give solidarity and willingness to cooperate with U.S. in combating terrorism. He was reportedly the first leader to call President Bush on the day of attacks, expressing condolences and the support, emphasized that Russia understood the pain of terror, referencing Russia's own experiences with terrorist attacks, particularly in Chechnya, but Putin condemned the attacks as a barbaric act of terrorism against innocent people and offered Russian solidarity with the American people. Then 2 months later, November of 2001, he supports the U.S. in Afghanistan. Putin backed the U.S.-led military intervention in Afghanistan to dismantle al-Qaeda and Taliban. Russia provided crucial logistic assistance, including opening Russian airspace for U.S. and NATO flights. Think about that. Most people forgot that. That's 23 years ago. They're sitting there saying, hey, we know you guys are doing this. Whatever you need, we're here to help you. Think America, Russia, whatever you need, we're helping you in NATO. We don't hear this story often when that took place, when they're helping Afghanistan, right? Facilitating the use of Central Asian bases by U.S. forces, sharing intelligence on Afghanistan terrorist networks. Putin's never been a fan of terrorist organizations, and he's openly described terrorism as a common enemy of both Russia and the U.S., signaling a shared commitment to global counterterrorism. This is good. This is 23 years ago. So at this time, November 2001, America's like, oh, okay, he's helping us out. Afghanistan, this is cool. we're getting the support. 2 years later, it's like, listen, guys, what's the story with this Iraq war? What are you guys doing with the Iraq war? I'm not with it. Invasion of Iraq, seen it as a destabilizing and outside the scope of counterterrorism. Now he's not showing support to some of the stuff that's going on. And how much did Iraq cost us? How much money? How many troops died? Then the color revolutions, the U.S. support for pro-democracy movements in former Soviet states such as Ukraine, Georgia, heightened Putin's suspicion of Western intentions. Like, wait a minute, guys, what are we doing?
That's huge too. That's huge too. What he's saying. Let me go back. The U.S. support for pro-democracy movements in former Soviet states. See, again, this is big because this is Putin saying, "Wait a minute, you are now interfering in something that you have no business in." Right? Why are you questioning now what we're doing, our way that we are handling our people? That's not cool.
States such as Ukraine, Georgia, heightened Putin's suspicion of Western intentions. Like, wait a minute, guys, what are we doing? I'll give you support, but don't think for a moment I'm naive. What are we doing here? I'm not with this, and I'm not with this. Don't blindly take my support that you can now do anything, and I'll back you up. And then NATO expansion, even more going into Eastern Europe. Guys, at this point, we have a problem. You're not showing that you want peace here. You're showing that you want to paint me as an enemy. And how much more can I go sitting here wanting to make things good with you guys, but you guys keep pushing the envelope. Now, this leads to 2004, 2005 Orange Revolution. You may have seen this documentary before. I think Oliver Stone did a good documentary on this. Protests in Ukraine were sparked by widespread allegations of electoral fraud during the 2004 presidential election, where Viktor Yanukovych was initially declared the winner over Viktor Yushchenko, but twice this happened, 04 and 14. However, demonstrations, civil disobedience, civil resistance, strike actions, revolt ordered by the Supreme Court of Ukraine that Viktor Yushchenko declared winner. At the same time, who had their hands on this? Couple NGOs. One of them was the National Endowment for Democracy, the NED, and the other one was the Open Society Foundation, which you know who that's a part of, George Soros. So it gets a little bit tricky here. Wait a minute, this guy wins, but you're not happy with them because this guy had no desire. Viktor Yanukovych, who had a decent relationship with Putin, had no desire to be part of NATO. And they're like, no, we don't want that. We want Ukraine to be part of NATO. Now imagine you're Putin. Wait a minute. All these promises, you want me to sit here? You just crossed the line. We now officially have a problem. That's why his motives are where they're at. Now, at the end of this 2008, 2012, Putin steps down. Dmitry Medvedev comes in because at the time they only had a two-term. Of course, later on it changes. But he steps down and tens of thousands of people participate in the 2011, 2012 Russian protests, also known as a snow revolution. Protests took place across major cities like Moscow, St. Petersburg, with chants like Russia without Putin and United Russia is the party of crooks and thieves. Now, the Bolotnaya Square protests in Moscow were among the largest since the 1990s. Now, here's where it gets tricky. So these guys are protesting to not be for Putin, right? And in America, NGOs can pay people to protest. We don't have a law against that. It happens all the time. And it's a regular thing. Open society has been behind it. Putin says, wait a minute, you guys want to pay these guys? This is allegedly, and some people can verify this, you guys are getting paid to protest against me, so you make me look like an idiot in Russia? No problem. I'm going to come back in and I'm going to make sure anybody that's taking money from any NGO, whether it's the National Endowment for Democracy or it's a USA, the United States Agency for International Development, anybody that's taking money from NGO, you have to declare it to everybody. You can't just go out there and take the money and fool the average Russian voter, not realizing what's really going on. By the way, you may or may not agree with whatever Putin's doing, but are you for NGOs paying people to be actors going outside, making a lot of ruckus, confusing the American people, and the media comes and says, oh, look, they're all against the president. They're all against the president. Look at all this stuff. Do you want to be manipulated? Do you want the American people to be manipulated? Because it happens in America all the time. He sits there and says, I'm not with the guys. You're not doing that. I think I need to come back. Now, imagine during this time, 2008, 2012, Putin's watching everything that's going on around the world. You have a lot of time, right? It's like, wait a minute. What's going on over here? What's going on over there? What is all this stuff? He's done, right? Assuming he's done. And he sees the global uprisings, Arab Springs, 2010, 2011. What happened to Middle East leaders like Ben Ali from Tunisia, Mubarak from Egypt, or Gaddafi, Libya? Even in the documentary Putin's Revenge, Julia Loaf, who is part of that documentary, says that Putin is said to have been deeply affected by the way Muammar Gaddafi was killed. He watched a video of a bloodied Gaddafi dragged from his bunker, sodomized and shot over and over and over. Think about it. He's watching. It's like, wait a minute. What are they doing to a guy like this over and over? And he thinks he is doing everything to avoid a similar fate. He's doing the opposite. This is the report that's being given by Julia. He's watching all this stuff taking place. When he got killed, Gaddafi, it was October 20th, 2011. So this is the 4-year span that he's not running Russia. And he's saying, this is kind of weird. They went after Saleh from Yemen. Then he saw the color revolutions with what happened with Georgia. He's saying all these post-revolution, Orange Revolution, then overthrows, all these things that's going on, this is influencing him to sit there and say, wait a minute, the fear of Western influence, saw these moments as U.S.-led effort to destabilize authoritarian regimes. He knows what he is. It's not like he's debating it. He knows what he is himself. Domestic parallels with Russian protests, shared traits with these uprisings that is being paid by NGOs. All of this influences him to say, you know, like, look, whether he wanted to come back all along or not, nobody knows, only he knows that. But all of this says, hey, no, listen, Dmitry, you're a good guy, but I think you're maybe a little bit of a pushover. This is Russia. I'm going to come back and defend this is my place. There's no way I'm going to let this happen to Russia. I'm coming back to clean house. And that influenced him to come back. Now, right after Gaddafi dies, October 20th, 2011, month and a half later, December 4th, 2011, Putin wins. When he wins, he's going to come back and be the president. Hillary Clinton gets out there and says the following. In that time, says, as Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton criticized Russia's parliamentary elections, calling them neither free nor fair, which reportedly angered Putin. So he comes back and there's a few things he does immediately. Says, number one, he cracked down on dissent, restricted NGOs, used anti-Western rhetoric to undermine opposition. Putin blamed protests on foreign interference, particularly from US, and accused Western-funded NGOs of inciting unrest. A law passed in 2012 requiring NGOs receiving foreign funding to register as foreign agents. Think about it. You're getting money from an NGO. You have to come out and say, hey guys, I'm a foreign agent. If you didn't, you're breaking the law. Something very weird that you need to know about. February of 2008, the current CIA director under Biden, William J. Burns, at the time was a U.S. ambassador to Russia, authored a confidential cable titled Niet.
This was huge. This was huge.
Means Niet, Russia's NATO enlargement red lines. In this document, the current CIA director, former ambassador to Russia, he conveyed Russia's strong opposition to NATO's eastward expansion, particularly regarding Ukraine and Georgia. He highlighted that Russia's officials viewed such enlargement as a potential military threat and a violation of their security interests.
Burns warned that pursuing NATO membership, he's talking about the Ukraine, right? For Ukraine could lead to internal divisions, violence, or even civil war, potentially compelling Russia to intervene. I'm going to rewind it so y'all can see him.
CIA director.
That's huge. That's big.
Former ambassador to Russia, he conveyed Russia's strong opposition to NATO's eastward expansion, particularly regarding Ukraine and Georgia. He highlighted that Russia's officials viewed such enlargement as a potential military threat and a violation of their security interests. Burns warned that pursuing NATO membership for Ukraine could lead to an internal divisions, violence, or even civil war, potentially compelling Russia to intervene. This is February of 2008. Right now, we're what? November of 2024. 16 years ago, current CIA director, former ambassador of Russia, saying, guys, what are we doing? What are we doing? 16 years ago, this guy knew what was going to take place and is given a warning to U.S. They're like, I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And by the way, you know who was president in 2008? Obama, 1 month after inauguration, saying, don't mess with these guys. It could backfire on us. Boom. Now, many will say we're on the brink of World War III. If one of those hypersonic weapons, their missiles they're sending has a nuclear bomb in it, guess what happens then? Game changer, right? Now, you remember in 2004, that whole protesting that took place when the two victors were running, Yushchenko, who wanted Ukraine to be part of NATO, and the other victor, which was Viktor Yanukovych, who was like, no, we don't need to be part of NATO. I will have a better relationship with Putin. Guess what? Yushchenko becomes president from 2005 to 2010 for Ukraine. This is the third president of Ukraine. Then the other victor, who's kind of like, nah, I have no interest in being part of Ukraine. He then becomes president. 2010 to 2014, he now is the president. However, protesting in Ukraine gets so bad in November of 2013 after Yanukovych refused to sign an EU association agreement favoring closer ties with Russia. Many Ukrainians, especially in the west and center of the country, supported EU integration as a pathway to economic reform, democratic governance, and escape in Russia's influence. Anger at Yanukovych's perceived corruption and authoritarianism drove public discontent. It was so nasty that he had to leave, and he was no longer safe being in Ukraine. I believe he escaped to Russia, if I'm not mistaken. So if you keep in mind, while this is taking place, the West is saying, no, this is all organic. It's what these people want. They want this. They want to join NATO. They want a better relationship with EU. They don't want to have anything to do with Russia. Putin saying, no, these people are not real. They're getting paid. And so the lady from the Frontline documentary done, Putin's Revenge, she went on the streets asking the people in Ukraine who were protesting, hey, did somebody pay you? And you know what many of them said? Yes, we were paid. She has nothing to do with this. She's Frontline, PBS, doing a documentary, Putin's Revenge. No, a lot of these guys were paid by NGOs to go out there and make it seem like they wanted the other guy. This is your part where you get to pick and choose and believe who you want to believe. Some say, no wonder this happened. US and NGOs are being involved to make sure there's a fall because they don't want more peace there, because they want a guy that wants to join NATO because we need a bigger enemy to keep going after them. This is business for us, right? Again, this is all allegedly. You get to pick and choose which argument you want to believe. So now the next 8 years, you know what happens? It's the back and forth of Russia against NATO, and each finding ways to piss the other one off. And this happens for 8 years. NATO expands its presence in Eastern Europe, which is Poland, Estonia, Latvia. Military exercises. NATO's doing these large-scale military exercises, such as Defender Europe or Trident Juncture. At the same time, Russia's responding and doing its own military exercises. The Zapad exercises, showing them the fact that, hey, we're ready for simulating large-scale conflict with NATO forces. Then there's allegations of cyber attacks from Russia to NATO members such as Ukraine and others, like the NotPetya attack of 2017, and then disinformation campaigns from both sides. Meanwhile, Ukraine growing NATO aspirations, declared NATO membership as a strategic goal in 2019. Again, can you imagine? It's like, wait a minute, what are you guys doing here, right? Enshrining it in its constitution. NATO provided increased financial and military assistance to Ukraine. Russia viewed NATO's growing relationship with Ukraine as a direct threat to its security, citing NATO's 2008 Bucharest Summit declaration that Ukraine and Georgia would eventually join the alliance. This keeps going back and forth, and it's getting more and more heated. Again, this leads to 2021, the military buildup near Ukraine. Russia amassed over 100,000 troops near Ukraine border in late 2021, citing security concerns, opposing NATO's continued expansion. NATO and Western leaders accuse Russia of preparing for an invasion. Then this comes to December of 2021. Russia makes its demands that a guarantee Ukraine would never join NATO and removal of NATO military infrastructure from Eastern Europe. NATO rejects those demands, affirming Ukraine's right to determine its alliance. They're now backtracking on their promises that they had. And a couple months after that request, guess what happens? War. So at the end of the day, the question becomes motive. What is NATO's motive? What is US's motive? What is Ukraine's motive? What is Putin's motive? Everybody's motive, right? They can tell us whatever they want that we see all over TV and news and all these experts that are speaking, but you and I have to study history for ourselves, for yourself. Say, I don't know, what is their motive? Because motive for Russia could be, if you look at this map from 1500s of what happened to Russia from then, where Fedor was there, then Boris and all these guys, all the way up, you see how much territory they got. And when you think about Ukraine was under Russian or Soviet control for 337 years, from 1667 to 1991. All right, so Russia's motive is to say what? Ukraine is really ours. What are you guys talking about? This is none of your business. This is our property. What are you doing? And then NATO's point may be, well, Yeltsin was easy to negotiate with. He was a bit of a pushover, nice guy. He was like a globalist. Maybe we could have worked with him and done some of the stuff that we wanted to do. Dmitry was kind of easier. This guy, Putin, is a true believer. And we got to get rid of this guy because he's in the way. Because if NATO and US really wanted peace, why don't you allow him to join NATO? And if you do, you put certain guidelines in place. Yes, we want to entertain you being part of NATO. Well, we need you to do boom, 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 boom. Why don't you do that? Why isn't that conversation taking place? Why? Is it because the people that are given the money are tied to maybe some of these military industrial complex companies that are like, wait a minute, guys, we need a little bit of war? Are they trying to push Russia to get strong with BRICS? Is that a good thing for the world? I don't know. But the most important thing we have to study is motive. Last night, my dad and I are sitting there. We're talking about different countries that have been destroyed because of war. And he says, how do they rebuild these countries? How do they do it? I said, major banks come in, like a chase, like a BlackRock. Hey, $400 billion, we'll rebuild your country at such and such. And if the country doesn't pay the money back, what do you think is the collateral? Your natural resources. The banks are going to get their money. Like imagine if somebody, you say, hey, I need $500,000. You go to Joey, I'll give you $500,000. Based on what? Back it up based on $1 million equity you have in your property. If you don't return $500,000 to me within a year, I own your land. Collateral, right? So these big banks are going to come in and say, oh, let's rebuild Ukraine, $400 billion. What if we can't pay back? Don't worry, we're going to get your natural resources. You got plenty. Hey, we got to get this Putin knocked out of the way. Why? Because the number one country in the world with natural resources is not us. It's Russia. $75 trillion. And there's a man in the way. You know what his name is? Putin. That guy's got to get out the way so we can go in Russia and do business. It's a lot of money. The more you and I know motives, the more we can understand why every one of these guys are presenting their argument the way they are. And then you will be responsible on whose motives you believe and whose motives you don't. But at the end of the day, history will tell us whose position was right and whose wasn't. Sometimes we have to wait a year or two and sometimes decades to find out if you were right or others were right. That takes a while until we find that out. If you got value out of this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And if you want to find out more about the history of NATO, if you've never seen it, like what they've done, click here to watch.
So that was, I appreciate y'all listening to that and hanging with me through that. I wanted to send out some notifications, right? But I wanted to give y'all something to watch and to look at. A couple points from that video that I thought were very interesting. Number one, he talked about how the CIA ambassador said, hey, listen, if the Ukraine gets involved with NATO, that could potentially push internal violence. It could cause uprising, but it could also cause Russian intervention, right? He said that back in 2008. I was like, wow, that's crazy. Also, you saw where NATO encroached. You saw where with the deal, it was a verbal agreement. Nonetheless, it was an agreement to leave the Russian territories alone, right? They were like, listen, we will not move, not even 1 inch. But you saw the map. You see how it started getting, Russia started getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's good to have all sides, brothers, sisters, ladies and gentlemen. That's what leading with logic is all about. Not having any form of confirmation bias, not having any cognitive dissonance, so that you can fully understand what it is at stake, who stands to gain, what angle people are coming from, and what game people are playing, right? Welcome, welcome, welcome. I know it's only an army of 4, but hey, it's all good. You dig what I'm saying? Listen, I am again, I am Brother Faheem. I am your gracious and humble host of the Leave of Logic podcast. Wherever you are, wherever you're watching this at, if you're under the sound of my voice and looking at the brother, please, please, please send this out to 10 of your friends. Please, please, please repost, retweet, whatever it is that you're doing. Also, I posted up www.leaveoflogic7.com. Go on over and support the movement. It's always good to get some logic on your brain. You dig what I'm saying? Stay in your brain with that logic, man. But yeah, I wanted you guys to see that. We were talking about the President Trump and Vice President Vance, that meeting that got pretty heated with President Zalensky. What I just showed was valuetainment. He just gave a brief rundown as to how the Ukrainian and Russian conflict got to where it is, to where it's bubbling over, right? It's a lot of hands involved, right? You wonder, what is U.S.? If I didn't realize that we can pay NGOs to go and start up disturbances. That's crazy, right? That's another thing that was learned. The NGOs can be paid to start disturbances. There can be actors out there. This shouldn't be surprising to us because we understand if we understand history, if we look and read history, then we understand that the United States, along with a lot of big governments, have used tactics like this, right? It is a book called Economic Hitmen where they talk about how they use tactics. They go in to negotiate, and if you are not with their negotiations, then they bring the jackals. They bring in these guys that will absolutely kill and perform coups. I say that to say that, hey, listen, the government is not above utilizing tactics that might not be that might be a little bit duplicitous, to say the least, right? Duplicitous, to say the least. But nonetheless, also, you know, what NATO has done, people have it's a lot of blame on a lot of people's hands, right? It's not just like, okay, it's Putin, he's this bad guy. It's not just like it's the Ukraine and they're these bad people, or Zelensky's a bad guy. It is a mixture of things. And that's what I hope you guys saw. how we were, or how the Ukrainian people were advised, listen, you please don't get involved with NATO because NATO has other intentions. And that's what a lot of historians are are discussing, right? What are the intentions? Why is NATO now involved? Is it because they really concerned about the Ukrainian people, or do they see that land as something viable with minerals and resources that can be exploited, that can be utilized in the world form, right? So, but getting to the actual occurrence, getting to the event, I'm going to show the meeting and what happened. I'm not going to show the full meeting, nowhere near as long as what I showed with that video, but I am going to show you the moments leading up to, and then a little bit of what was said. And welcome. If you guys can, always go to C-SPAN. I was taught about C-SPAN in school. Always frequent C-SPAN. Why? Because regardless of what your political affiliation is, C-SPAN is going to give you raw and uncut, no bias, no abridged. It's going to just give you what was said. It's going to give you the information. It's on you now to go back and fill in color so that you can understand better. It's not going to give it to you through any one lens. It's not going to be a liberal or conservative lens. It's going to be, listen, these are the facts. It's up to you now to go and read up and understand what you just heard through your own clear conscience, right? Using your own logic. So this is that fateful meeting.
But during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. People are been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him. Me, like a new president in 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel. We signed ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people, and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking.
So let me say this. What you just heard was President Zelensky responding to JD Vance speaking about diplomacy, right? Because a lot of what was discussed was, hey, we want to end this war, we want to end this ceasefire, because obviously a lot of resources, a lot of American resources are being uh, utilized, right? It's volatile and it's also long going, and it doesn't look like there is an ending in sight. And so Donald Trump's thing is, look, I want to get the ceasefire. Now there is a mineral deal. I want this deal. We need to make a deal. His attitude was, you guys need to make a deal. Let's make this deal so that we can end it. And Zelensky was saying, hey, listen, we want to do it. We want to end the war. But at the same time, we need a little bit something more than just a guarantee. We need something more than just a contract. We need something more, because this guy has done A, B, C, and D when we've had contracts in the past, and that's not cool. In other words, we don't trust this dude. We don't trust him at all, and we don't trust you, or we don't believe that he will respect even your contract, because he's shown us in the past where he has not. And so we're going to get into, I have Mark Rubio. Mark Rubio discussed a little bit of why the frustration happened in the way that it did, right? He talked about what was supposed to be discussed as opposed to what actually was discussed. But I just want to give y'all that context. That's where President Zelensky's coming from.
About the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come to the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems? bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems. Even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly what
Remember
you're
this.
doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very
You will
good.
feel influence.
We're going to feel very
I'm
good and
telling
very
you,
strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed
From the
yourself
very-
to be in a
from
very
the very
bad position,
beginning
and
of
he
the
happens
war.
to be right
From
about
the
it.
very beginning of the war.
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position.
I
You
was
don't have
saying,
the cards right now. With us, you start having
not playing
cards.
cards.
Right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
You're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
What do you
You're
think about?
gambling with
What do you
World
think
War III. And
Yeah.
what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country,
I'm
that's
with
back
all
to you.
respect to your
Far
country.
more than a lot of people said
Very
they
respect.
should have.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
times.
No, in this
Even
entire meeting, have
today.
you said thank
Even
you?
today.
You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war, you
He's
can...
not speaking loudly. He's not
Yeah.
speaking loudly. Your country's
Can I-
in big
can-
trouble.
Can I
Wait a
answer?
minute. No.
Can
You've
I
done a lot
answer?
of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not
I
winning.
know.
You're not winning this. You have a damn
We-
good chance of
we are
coming out
staying,
okay because of
Mr.
us.
President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks
You haven't
in
been
this
alone.
cabinet,
You
and
haven't
not
been
only
alone.
in this
We
cabinet.
gave you, through
I
this
said
stupid
thank-
president, $350 billion.
You
We
voted
gave
for
you
your president.
military equipment,
You
and you
voted
men
for
are
your
brave,
president.
but they had to use our military.
What about West?
If you didn't have
You
our
invited
military
me-
equipment,
You invited
if
me
you
to
didn't
speak.
have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3
okay?
days, I heard it from Putin. In 3 days, this is something
Maybe
new.
less.
In 2 weeks, of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I
Again,
tell you.
just say thank you.
I said a lot of times
Except that
thank
there,
you
except
to
that,
American people.
except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for
Woo. So that was when it like they used to say, that was when the shit hit the fan. When he was now speaking about the history of it, right? And one would think to yourself, wow, why would they get so upset at him just, basically laying out the history, what has happened, what has been their experience with Putin? What's going on with that? Why would they now, if it's the truth, right? In the same way that Americans are saying in defense of our president and vice president, they're telling the truth, right? It doesn't matter. He's telling the truth. They're telling the truth. The same way with him, right? He's telling the truth. But now let's hear what the pundits had to say about this. And I want you guys to hear what all people discuss with this before I give y'all my take on this.
This play out and raising real questions about what the two leaders here are going to be able to get done behind the scenes. This is the photo of the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States as they were just shouting at one another between the three of them in an incredibly remarkable moment.
Trump doesn't seem to think that the sting of Putin is going to reach the United States. He emotionally rejected the idea that Zelensky was presenting, that there will be effects here in the United States, that it will be felt here. What did you think of that?
This started innocently enough. The same way the French and the British leaders came and pushed back gently on Trump, Zelensky had started giving a history lesson about how Putin first seized Crimea in 2014. Trump corrected him, said 2015. He's like, no, 2014. And then explained how they had signed 2 different peace deals with Putin, Minsk I and Minsk II, that Germany and France also signed to guarantee. And what he was trying to do was show Trump, we have tried to do diplomacy before and it hasn't worked. He was being very genteel and patient as he explained it. And it was Vance who took.
Hold on. Forgive me. I'm tripping. Hold on. We are now experiencing technical difficulties. Here we go. It's coming right back. It's coming right back, y'all. That video is coming right back.
I haven't heard you say thank you once. It was almost like he was bawling out one of his young kids and he warmed to his subject. And once it became that tone, Trump took that tone on and jumped into the attacks. And I don't know how you get from that back to, look, you can't trust Putin. And here's why. I can only imagine what it was like once they all went into a conference room and had to look at each other across the table.
Yeah. And what did you think as you were watching this, Jeff?
I mean, it's pretty shocking. But what I think really stands out to me is that this administration grossly overestimates its ability to bring about a deal. Completely agree with the point that you can't trust deals made with Russian President Putin. But I take it a step further than that and say, as long as Russian troops are advancing in the East, and they are, and he believes he's winning, you're not going to get a meaningful deal. In the sense, by meaningful, I mean like some kind of lasting peace. So I don't even think they're going to get to the point where he's violating
he has
the
the upper hand. So why would he proceed in that regard,
That's
you mean?
right. Yes, none of his strategic objectives about changing the government in Ukraine and really controlling the strategic direction of Ukraine, none of that has changed. And as long as he thinks he can do that by what he's doing right now, he's going to keep doing that. And the rest of the negotiations with him, that's just smoke and mirrors.
And my impression is that basically Trump's national security team, people like Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, they're very traditionalist, they're anti-Russia, but like past Trump administration officials, they sold Trump on this deal through the lens of business, through the lens of making investments for U.S. companies possible, leveling the playing field with China, because China has 70% of the rare earth minerals, and this would give the U.S. a jump on some of that. But the whole idea was this was something to build on. Sign this loose agreement, then that goodwill would make Zelensky look like the good guy who made Trump look good, and we would build on that from there. And now this all just got blown up, and you could see a lot of the messages that he had absorbed, that Trump had absorbed from his conversations with Putin, just coming out. I don't know how you talk down from this.
What about, Jeff, that glimmer of hope that Nick Payton Walsh alluded to, the idea that Donald Trump as a negotiator would respect someone that would hold a hard line against him, that Zelensky going in there and standing his ground, even at one point as cameras were being escorted out, smiling and giving a thumbs up for the cameras, sort of as if to show that he's not intimidated by the situation, that his country isn't on the line. Would that work to his advantage? Do you see that as a possibility?
I don't. And I think that I understand that Trump likes to be up against somebody that he respects. But what you're seeing is a real shift in U.S. foreign policy. If you're stepping back for a moment, where he respects Putin, he respects Xi Jinping, China, and those are the people he wants to deal with. Anybody else is just not an equal, right? And so in some ways, the foreign policy that's emerging is actually very similar to Chinese and Russian foreign policy, in that in the world you have a couple centers of gravity where the real power is. We'll work things out amongst us, and like all the rest of the countries just need to fall in line. I won't mess with your area, you don't mess with my area, and we'll just straighten it out ourselves. And Zelensky doesn't rise to that level in Trump's eyes.
Meanwhile, watch his popularity ratings back home. They're going to soar. They're at 65. They're going to be higher. And European nations who were thinking about, oh, we got to go it alone after watching that spectacle, they're going to be like, okay, it's us in Ukraine. We cannot count on this White House.
So, this is interesting because, it really is showing that the EU really is not backing the current administration, the Trump and JD Vance administration. These are global affairs analysts, right? They're looking at international relations. Now, specifically, I want y'all to see that, but I want y'all to listen to this next lady. And I'm giving y'all a myriad of perspectives, right? Because that's what you need to do in order to be able to think critically, not just take your side, right? If you're liberal, you got to go past the liberal perspective. If you are conservative, you got to move past the conservative perspective, right? Because that's how you find that truth. And it takes sometimes some history, sometimes it takes some politics. Oftentimes, what I found in politics is it takes finances. When you start to now follow the money, where the money is going to, where the money is potentially, where it's going to be utilized, who's going to benefit from it, you'll then get to the bottom of those motives, and you'll then see what is really going on. Because we understand the media not only does the media have the ability to distort and contort information, they're also very good at hiding, right? And keeping things from the public, keeping information that is critical and vital to understand, right? So to help you think for yourselves about what is going on and who really is at fault and who really is pulling the strings. It's not always as it seems. So I just want the people, and I know I'm holding longer than I typically do, I just want the people to hear all the perspectives before I give mine. But this next young lady is another global analyst. I thought it was interesting because she revealed some things that was said by our administration prior to, right? And we're going to listen to Rubio and hear what he had to say, what his take was, because he's going to explain why they were frustrated to begin with. But this next lady has a very insightful perspective.
Let's talk a little bit more about that with CNN chief international anchor Christian Amanpour. Let's talk, Christian, about how European leaders are going to view this moment.
Well, look, I think just what your guest just said, it's going to be you can imagine everybody in Europe now has their head in their hands, particularly after the parade of European presidents and prime ministers just came back from fairly successful meetings with President Trump. They never got what they wanted in terms of a security guarantee for Ukraine, because that's what they really need if there's to be any peace. But now they're going to be wondering, is there going to be any deal to even police and to enforce? Are we just going to have to continue funding and supplying this war? What I can tell you is the British Prime Minister has announced that he is having a summit in London this weekend on Sunday. He's invited all the major European leaders, and President Zelensky was due to be coming back from Washington via London to take part in that summit. This was, designed to, compare notes, all their trips to the White House, how to go forward. I don't know whether that will still happen. I don't know what they might discuss. It seems it's even more urgent for that summit to take place, given what just happened in the White House. Look, from a European and an overseas perspective, what seemed to have happened was this very strange new White House way of having these long and lengthy Oval Office sprays with the press where they do talk for a long time. It's not usual. This is, an accident waiting to happen. You saw the Zelensky handshake as he met with President Trump at the portico. He was incredibly tense. Zelensky's body language, very tense, knew everything that was riding on this, on this meeting. And then, as everybody said, a fairly okay meeting devolved into this really horrendous catastrophe in the last 10 minutes. And as everybody has said, launched by the intervention of the Vice President JD Vance, this year in Munich, basically, washed his hands of Ukraine. Last time he was in Munich at the security conference, basically told Europeans and Ukrainians that I don't care really much what happens to Ukraine. So there's some animosity there, as you can imagine. Untruths about Zelensky never saying thank you, and a very, twisted and tortured version of what's actually been going on during this war. But I think, as many people said, Zelensky's main aim, as he said himself, but I want to ask what the US is prepared to do going forward. And perhaps I need to ask, whose side is the Trump administration on, Ukraine's or Putin's? And I think what you saw in that meeting was much more of the United States administration, the president and the vice president, taking all the Putin talking points and being frustrated with Zelensky and using those talking points. That, in terms of a transatlantic alliance and in terms of a superpower going forward, is really the major shift that everyone overseas has been incredibly concerned about. And it also seemed to be a performance for domestic politics. What President Trump and Vice President Vance were doing, it seemed, was as much a domestic political campaign appearance as anything else. I mean, at one point you heard President Trump going back on the Russia hoax and the Hunter Biden laptop and on and on and on. There is bad blood between these two leaders from the very beginning. But again, let's not forget that it was the javelins that Trump did provide that allowed Ukraine to fend off the Russians in those early days. Very important. These weapons work. But let's also not forget that it was Trump who convinced his MAGA allies in Congress this time last year to pause the latest delivery of weapons to Ukraine. And that was a 7-month lag, which cost territory, which cost lives, and which has put Ukraine in a very bad place. But to keep hearing the president of the United States tell the Ukrainian president and the people of Ukraine, who fought this much mightier army off for 3 years, that they have no cards to play, that they either take a deal and make a deal or the United States is out, this is music to President Putin's eyes. Music.
We're joined.
I think she meant to his ears. But hey, what do I know? But I thought it was interesting what she said. She said that the javelins, the same javelins that were allowed the Ukrainian people to be strong when they were extracted, now it also caused a lot of suffering, right? And you know, she also spoke about how just a history lesson is what caused them to pop off, right? Is what caused them to speak to him in a way that was very belittling, right? And so she was a chief international anchor. So these are all people who have they have observed, they have dealt with different governments, they have dealt with different administrations, right? Now, I was super interested in what the right had to say as well, right? So I wanted to hear what Mark Rubio, how he would respond, because I understood he was there, he was sitting there, and he kind of gave some clarity. I wanted to hear, it's good to listen to your opposition or your perceived opposition, because it's in those moments that you can really learn a whole lot, right? You can learn a whole lot. And so I want you guys to, my service is getting nervous. Time for me to clean up this computer, but that's why it's taking so long. But here, Mark Rubio has quite a bit to say. Hold on. We're going to get right to him. He's going to explain why it was, and he's going to give a little bit of insight as to where the frustration came from, right? Because it seemed like it just exploded and came out of nowhere. He's going to give us some great detail as to why there was a bit of irritation.
The Secretary of State who was in that room today, Marco Rubio. Thank you so much, Secretary Rubio, for being here. We just heard from President Zelensky. He said he does not think that he owes President Trump an apology for what happened inside the Oval Office today. Do you feel otherwise?
I do, because you guys don't see, you guys only saw the end. You saw what happened today. You don't see all the things that led up to this. So let me explain. The president's been very clear. He campaigned on this. He thinks this war should have never started. He believes, and I agree, that had he been president, it never would have happened. Now here we are. He's trying to bring an end to this conflict. We've explained very clearly what our plan is here, which is we want to get the Russians to a negotiating table. We want to explore whether peace is possible. They understand this. They also understand that this agreement that was supposed to be signed today was supposed to be an agreement that binds America economically to Ukraine, which to me, as I've explained, and I think the president alluded to today, is a security guarantee in its own way, because we're involved. It's now us. It's our interests. That was all explained. That was all understood. And nonetheless, for the last 10 days, in every engagement we've had with the Ukrainians, there's been complications in getting that point across, including the public statements that President Zelensky has made. But they insisted on coming to D.C. This agreement could have been signed 5 days ago, but they insisted on coming to Washington. And there was and should have been a very clear understanding. Don't come here and create a such scenario where you're going to start lecturing us about how diplomacy isn't going to work. President Zelensky took it in that direction, and it ended in a predictable outcome as a result. It's unfortunate. That wasn't supposed to be this way. The path he chose, and I think, frankly, sends his country backwards in regards to achieving peace, which is what President Trump wants at the end of the day, is for this war to end. He's been as consistent as anyone can be about what his objective is here.
But what specifically do you want to see President Zelensky apologize for?
Well, apologize for turning this thing into the fiasco for him that it became. There was no need for him to go in there and become antagonistic. Look, this thing went off the rails. You were there, I believe. It went off the rails when he said, let me ask you a question to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Well, this is a serious thing. I mean, thousands of people have been killed, thousands. And he talks about all these horrible things that have happened to prisoners of war and children, all true, all bad. This is what we're dealing with here. It needs to come to an end. We are trying to bring it to an end. The way you bring it to an end is you get Russia to the table to talk. And he understands that attacking Putin, no matter how anyone may feel about him personally, forcing the president into a position where you're trying to goad him into attacking Putin, calling him names, maximalist demands about Russia having to pay for the reconstruction, all the sorts of things that you talk about in a negotiation. Well, when you start talking about that aggressively, and the president's a deal maker, he's made deals his entire life, you're not going to get people to the table. And so you start to perceive that maybe Zelensky doesn't want a peace deal. He says he does, but maybe he doesn't. And that active, open undermining of efforts to bring about peace is deeply frustrating for everyone who's been involved in communications with them leading up to today. And I think he should apologize for wasting our time for a meeting that was going to end the way it did.
You yourself have said previously that Putin cannot be trusted in negotiations. That was the point that President Zelensky was ultimately making during that conversation, is that there cannot be an agreement without security guarantees, because he was talking about all the ceasefire agreements before, or agreements that Putin has just blown past. I mean, do you still feel that way, that Putin cannot be trusted in these negotiations?
Well, I was there yesterday when the president said in front of the media that our approach is going to be trust but verify. President Trump's made deals his entire life. He's not going to get suckered into some deal that's not a real deal. We all understand this. We understand it on our end for certain. And so the goal here is to get to a place where we have to explore whether peace is possible. I've said this repeatedly. I don't know. I think it is, based on what they've said so far, but we have to explore that. How else is this war going to end? I ask people, what is the European plan to end this war? I can tell you what one foreign minister told me, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I can tell you what one of them told me, and that is that the war goes on for another year. And at that point, Russia will feel so weakened that they'll beg for a peace. That's another year of killing, another year of dying, another year of destruction. And by the way, not a very realistic plan in my point of view. So if there's a chance of peace, even if it's a 1% chance, that needs to be explored. And that's what President Trump is trying to do here.
President Trump said just when he was leaving the White House after that meeting that he doesn't think President Zelensky wants peace. But isn't that why the Ukrainian leader was in the Oval Office for that meeting today?
Well, he was in the Oval Office to sign a minerals rights deal. That's what he was in the Oval Office to sign today. But again, when you have comments that deliberately appear to be after having discussed this repeatedly, deliberately appear to be geared towards making the argument that peace is not possible. Again, he turns to the vice president. What kind of diplomacy are you talking about? Almost as if to say, these people, you can't deal with them. You can't have any negotiations with Putin because he can't be trusted, and you're just wasting your time on negotiations. Well, he's basically undermining everything the president has told him he's trying to do. Look, there's no need for that. You start to suspect, does he really want an end to this war? Does he just think that, we have to do whatever he says and give him anything he wants without any end game? That was the Biden strategy. We were funding a stalemate. We were funding a meat grinder. And unfortunately, for the Ukrainians, the Russians have more meat to grind, and they don't care about human life. We've seen it, human waves, the North Koreans, etc. And so
that's what a lot of Americans are frustrated by, what he said with funding. Joe Biden's way was just give them what they want, fun. And that took resources. And I understand that.
this is a very complex thing. It's very delicate. It's very costly. It's very bloody. It needs to be brought to an end, but it isn't going to be brought to an end with public pronouncements and maximalist demands in the public, but in real diplomacy. The vice president was right.
That old rubber hose splits and leaks everywhere. Get the Pocket Hose Cup.
I'm not paying for YouTube, so we have these things. I'm sorry. All right, here we go.
When you say they don't care about life, are you talking about the Russians or the Ukrainians?
Well, the Russians, I mean, they're conscripting by the hundreds of thousands. They brought in North Korean troops that were slaughtered in Kursk, and they keep going because they got more people. That's the other fact. Look, and it's, again, we go back to the same point. I'm not going to fall into this trap of the who's bad and who's evil. People can make those conclusions. People have seen how this narrative has played out and where we are today and how this all started and so forth. The point now is it has to end. And the way it ends is you get people to a negotiating table, and the president, who's the ultimate deal maker, knows you don't get people to a negotiating table when you're calling them names and you're accusing them of things, because at the end of the day, this is not a political campaign. Okay, this is high stakes international diplomacy and an effort to bring about an end to a very, very dangerous war.
But you yourself, sir, have said before that you believe Putin is a war criminal, that is a widely accepted fact. You've called him a butcher. And you said that as a Secretary of State, you do believe it's important for someone with such global influence as you have to speak with that kind of moral clarity.
Yeah, and at this moment, as Secretary of State, my job working for the president is to deliver peace, to end this conflict and end this war. Ultimately, that is the job of the State Department. The State Department doesn't fight wars, it ends them. It tries to end them. And that's usually, by the way, celebrated. I mean, throughout history, I've watched presidents that bring about an end to wars and conflicts, and people celebrate that. They applaud it. I think we should be very proud and happy that we have a president whose prime objective is not to get into wars, but to prevent wars and to get out of wars. That is a very noble, laudable goal. Everyone should be applauding it, and he should be given the space to do that, not undermined by demands that he call Putin names or that we say things that impede the ability to conduct real diplomacy, as the vice president said today.
To follow up on what you just said a moment ago, are you saying that you have doubts that President Zelensky wants this war to come to an end?
What I have doubts about is whether he's willing to say and do the things that we need in order to get a negotiation. Again, this has been going on for 10 days. And, to see things in the press saying we're not coordinating with the Ukrainians, that's absolutely false. Over the last 10 days, the Ukrainians have met with the Secretary of Commerce, the Secretary of State, the Vice President of the United States, had a phone call with President Trump, and he was in the Oval Office today. I've talked to the foreign minister of Ukraine 3 times in the last 10 days. The argument that we're not engaging, but yet you keep reading these press accounts about, they're leaving us out. We're not involved. We're not engaged. None of these things are true, and it continues. So all that led up to today in a deep sense of frustration. And my hope is that this all can be reset and maturity can kick in and some pragmatism, because this war tonight, people will die in Ukraine. Tonight, people will die in this conflict. We're trying to bring an end to this conflict, which is unsustainable. It's an unsustainable, bloody war that has to come to an end. And right now, the only leader in the world that can even have a chance of bringing about an end to this is named President Donald Trump. And we need to give him the opportunity to try and do that. And when you see efforts to impede it, when you tell someone, don't say, let's not talk about these things. Let's not go in this direction because it makes it harder for us to engage. And they insist on doing it anyways. You start to wonder. I don't like to impugn people's motives, but you start to wonder what's behind it. So look, again, let's hope that this can be salvaged, but I'm not sure after today.
You don't believe that you're not sure that this can be salvaged. I mean, can this relationship between Zelensky and Trump be repaired in your view?
I think anything is possible, but it has to go back to the point that President Trump is interested in being involved in this for the purposes of bringing about an enduring and lasting peace. That's what he wants to achieve. And I think if I'm a country, that's involved in a war with a bigger country who's losing thousands thousands of people, who's had 3 million people leave my country because they can't be there, who is facing these challenges, I would be thanking a president who's trying to help bring about an end to this war. I would be thanking him, and I would be supportive of what he's trying to do, at least in my public pronouncements and in my public posture. And we didn't see that today, and we haven't seen that for the last few days. Now, will that change? I hope so. It should for the purposes of global peace and stability in Europe and around the world.
Well, all right. So you see where Mark Rubio, peace, y'all. Peace. Welcome everybody in, man. Welcome everybody in. Let me, before I now go forward, let me recognize some people. Hopefully they're still here. RB, R875, RB75, peace. Big brother Ice, what's going on? What's going on, black man? Big Wise, I see you, bro. I see you. Big brother Farabee, hey man, I miss you, big brother. And also my man, Askia the Great. Askia the Great is watching. He was watching. Now I'm reading what you guys are saying. So it says, I'm just gonna read it. And you guys can put what you guys are feeling, right? Any sentiments that you guys have is welcome, whether you on the far right or the far left or in between, you independent, it doesn't matter. I'm here for it. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. Sultan says, no less than a year ago, Rubio's stance was a complete 180. He was a hawk when it came to funding Ukraine. For the U.S., it's about getting those minerals, the money. Zelensky wants a guarantee the U.S. will be there to keep Russia from taking the country. Hey, I love you more, brother. Absolutely. Listen, I'm gonna go into something that was brought to my attention. My good brother, a good brother of mine. I'm gonna shout my brother out. His name is Rod, Big Rod. This is a brilliant brother, super brilliant brother, businessman, savvy trader, and just all around sweet soul, man, and supporter of Lead with Logic too. By the way, man, I add, that's the best thing. But no, he's a supporter of brother Faheem, and whatever Faheem is into, that's beneficial and that's positive and productive. But nonetheless, the brother's politically inclined, and he kind of he gave me some insight into the 100-year deal. A lot of people are not discussing this 100-year deal, right? I'm not even sure if you guys are aware of it. So I did a little digging, and I found an article that it deals with this 100-year deal, right? And we're going to go over that so that you guys can know what that is. So that you guys can know what it is. And this is on Al Jazeera. All these resources you guys have access to. If you have internet, if you have Wi-Fi, then you have exactly what I'm showing you. This is nothing that you have to search for too far. I'm going to show you where I got it. This is Al Jazeera. Now, this is from the opinion, right? UK's 100-year partnership with Ukraine is a meaningless political stunt by Ian Proud, right? He's a former British diplomat. The century-long commitment made by Keir Starmer's government will not do much to counter the shift in Western policy towards Ukraine under Trump. Talks about the prime minister, right? Announced a 100-year partnership between their countries during a meeting in Kiev on January 16th, on the eve of Donald Trump's inauguration as the 47th United States president. This was Starmer's attempt to position Britain as Ukraine's best friend at a time when Zelensky needs all the friends he can get. In truth, the 100-year partnership appears to offer nothing new. So when you get into the weeds of it, it's not doing a whole bunch, right? Hopefully I hate when that happens. Okay, never mind. Treaties are the circuitry that make relations between states function. Any VIP visit to another country prompts a scramble to to agree deals that can be announced as a sign of both countries are focused on strengthening their partnership. Since 1892, the United Kingdom has entered into 15,000 treaties. This agreement with Ukraine must be seen in that light, right? The UK and Qatar, for example, reached a number of agreements during the state visit of Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani in December 2024, including a 1.3 billion agreement on cooperation in fintech and green energy, plus a deal to increase joint funding of humanitarian projects. Sometimes these agreements are pushed with vigor by one side more than the other in their desire to have something to celebrate. I brokered a cultural agreement between the UK and Indonesia during the visit by President Megawati Sukarno Putri in the summer of 2002. The Foreign Office reluctantly agreed with what I saw as meaningless document, knowing that it was important for the Indonesian side. Prime Minister Starmer and President Zelensky appeared sincere in their commitment to the 100-year partnership, but that doesn't make it meaningful. Both appear to be clutching for good news at a time when Western policy towards Ukraine seems set to change. Newly inaugurated President Trump has set himself as a target to end the Ukraine war in 100 days, right? Even if the new U.S. administration continues some level of military support to Ukraine, it's doubtful that it will match the enormous $175 billion in support since the war started in 2022. Ukraine's second largest donor, Germany, have this financial support over the past year, and its leaders are fighting over an additional support package of $3 billion in the running up to elections. So other countries we see are having disputes about where the money should be allocated to. And this is becoming a problem. Just like Americans are having problems accepting money going toward the Ukraine. Obviously, they're having problems in Germany as well. But now Germany jumped on board. Let me say this as well. The leaders that jumped on board with Zelensky are these leaders, basically a lot of the Europeans, the French. The French said that the Ukraine is the one being aggressed against, while Russia is the aggressor. You had Italy. They had a summit where they got behind, and Britain said, listen, we're going to give you endless support, right? All of these places. The only place that I saw that agreed with Donald Trump or with President Trump was Hungary. He said, listen, way to step up, way to stand on your principles, way to, take up for your country. But nonetheless, these other countries are now siding with Zelensky, calling him a hero, saying that what he did was absolutely wonderful and marvelous, and they love to see it. Ukraine second, okay. That leaves Ukraine's third largest donor and arguably its most ardent supporter, Britain, to try and plug the growing gap in political, financial, and military support for the country. However, that simply won't be possible. By the standards of government spending, $5 billion Britain has given the Ukraine each year since 2022 is fairly small. It is, in fact, tiny compared to what the Americans gave, and still nothing much in comparison with the more generous payouts that were made by the Germans. So we see where the U.S. and Germany have been the largest donors over there to the UK. And it would only make sense at a time like now when inflation is going up, when jobs are scarce, when the economy is tanking. You have to clean up when you're on a budget, right? When you make out a budget for your home, certain things have to be cut out. Necessities are the only things that persist. Luxuries, that trip you might want, baby, to the beach, it might have to go. That money that you send some people that was extra, that was surplus. We don't have that surplus now. It has to be kicked back. This is all this is saying, right? The current Labor government has been rocked by bad news on the economy since it came to power in July 2024. With UK government debt having crept above 100% of gross domestic product, GDP, and following a record spike in the interest the UK pays on its government borrowing, Starmer had to warn the public of potentially ruthless cuts to public service while he was in the Ukraine. These ruthless cuts for those people who are lifelong liberals, right? This is what essentially the conservatives or the Republicans, this is what they do, right? They make those cuts. They make those ruthless cuts to a lot of social services in defense of or having the United States fiscal health in mind. That's what that reminds me of. We understand that there are going to be certain things that suffer under the Republicans. There are going to be a lot of things, a lot of social aid is going to be now, especially if the economy is in bad shape. It's going to be kicked out, right? Those ruthless cuts, those budgets, all of that stuff is going to come into play. But now again, like one of me and my neighbors were talking about, it's only 48 months. It's only 4 years. And then after that, what we will see is a whole lot of this thing to be undone. That's the beauty of being in America. The pendulum swings back and forth. It's not like other countries where people stay in office for years and years and years, and they have their foot on the neck of the people and the economy in such a way that generations and generations buckle up under tyranny or up under weak economic a weak economic foundation in that nation state. So that's just how I perceive, each of the, or at least the Republican Party here in the United States. Following a badly handled cut to winter fuel payments for old people, the Labor government seems to on the verge of possibly cutting disability benefits. We hear things like this. This is overseas, but we hear things like this in the United States. Unlike in the U.S., UK policy towards Ukraine enjoys strong cross-party parliamentary support. The UK mainstream media has also insulated both the Conservative and Labour governments from any criticism of their spending in Ukraine. So that's the difference. See, we're critical of the spending, right? It says over there that, first of all, they're working together. Yeah, they're in agreement, but also they don't allow any type of criticisms, right? So they don't show it, and it's things that the media doesn't show us over here as well. But it typically it's not criticism. They show us a lot of criticism. They don't show us anything else. But with Trump pushing for ceasefire talks between Ukraine and Russia, and as economic bad news piles up in Britain, UK government spending on Ukraine won't stay off limits forever. On this basis, and despite the eye-catching title, Leland last week's 100-year partnership announcement was new. The UK and Ukraine already agreed upon a 568-page political free trade and strategic partnership agreement in 2020 that was finally laid before Parliament shortly before war broke out in January 2022. The strategic dialogue announced last week was included in the 2020 treaty. The $3.7 billion in nearly military funding has been in place since the start of the war, and the $2.7 billion loan was agreed in June 2024 with the G7's extraordinary revenue acceleration loan of $50 billion for the Ukraine. So this deal that they're signing is nothing new in there. But I wanted to get to where I don't want to go too much. I want to get to where we see Donald Trump, the President Trump's. Here we go. A ceasefire in Ukraine would put pressure on Kyiv to scale back its vast military expenditures, which account for 50% of government spending and 1/4 of GDP each year. Upon a Trump-brokered ceasefire, the need for foreign handouts should reduce, at least in theory. The inclusion of a 100-year in the name of this agreement is in any case legally meaningless, as states can withdraw from treaties at any time. Russia and the U.S. have between them withdrawn from several nuclear arms control treaties in recent years, including the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty and New START Treaty on the reduction and limitation of strategic offensive weapons. There's no guarantee that a future British government might not ditch this agreement on the basis that it is potentially costly. It is a potentially costly political millstone. Basically, this is something that won't guarantee maximum participation for parties involved. Also, it's very costly. Now, the 100-year agreement is merely a political stunt. It's a breathless attempt by Starmer to show that the UK can prop up flagrant Western support for Ukraine at a time when Trump, with whom by all accounts he has a dreadful relationship, is about to reassert much needed realism into Ukrainian policy. Okay. So again, what the brother was trying to tell me was this 100-year deal was really something that was a farce, as this article is saying. It's really not meant to help. It really doesn't have any brevity or any real depth or meaning or obligation. But what it does is it puts Trump, right? It says to Trump, see, look, we can now we can get something done before you come into office, because we understand when you come into office, things are going to change. Your administration is going to be fundamentally different from the previous administration, right? Whereas Biden was giving, Donald Trump and the Republicans, I said it like they're singers, right? That's always funny. Michael Jackson and the Jackson Five, Diana Ross and the Supremes, Donald Trump and the Republicans. Well, the new administration that's in the White House now, like he said, about to reassert much needed realism into Ukraine policy. We heard Rubio say that in the deal for the minerals, the United States will be economically tied in. So we'll be there, right? We will, by default, put resources, meaning security. We'll by default have people over there, right? But now that 100-year deal is being viewed as just a stunt. And obviously, there are parties inside of the EU, the European Union, that have issues with this administration, right? And you heard somebody was talking about that. One of the people that I let you guys hear was saying, hey, a lot of our allies have been, you know what, it might not have been on here, but maybe it was a conversation I was having. A lot of our allies, it was a conversation. A lot of our allies, a lot of people who we have been doing business with have been getting over. They have been milking it quite a bit. And that's why a lot of these tariffs, a lot of these new policies, a lot of these orders have been put into place. That's why we see President Trump saying, we're getting ready to, like he threatened, I think it was Mexico, because Mexico was charging them so much a high interest rate, right, on the tariffs, more so than what was necessary. And he was like, nah, if you do that, I'm going to cut everything off and it's going to double, right? And so the European Union is standing behind Zelensky. This is what the article was alluding to, and what is out there, what is being put out there, what is being stated, right? What the media is not showing. The media is not discussing how this 100-year deal is going to affect the Ukraine and Russian war, because what it does is, again, it gets all of the union involved, right? And as we saw, all those billions be given by Germany, be given by the United States. They will still get it. They will still get all of those resources. It just won't be. The America will have to now support, and it won't have to broker a deal really with America, right? We don't really need a. And what we are seeing now, they're behind. They signed that deal, so the EU is behind Zelensky. They're absolutely behind him. They have backed him up. So that would only affirm or confirm that this 100-year deal was a farce, and that these other leaders are trying to now get the leg up and get America to now rent out or force their soldiers to help for a little bit of nothing. So when you look at it from all sides, I will say this: I understand the president's perspective. I do. And I understand why the Ukraine is moving and functioning the way they're functioning. And I also understand from the history that we got to view, right? And how different treaties were violated against Russia, how, its land was encroached upon and it was minimized, right? I see how he could be upset. That's why in that document, "niet" means "niet." Hey, we might not want to enter in. It kind of makes you look at the NATO like, why are they doing this? What is the real motive? What's the motive behind all of this? Right? Why would they now encroach? Why would they now begin to take over our land or the land that they said that they would not? So I get it. With all that being said, I'm going to go back to something Professor James Small said when he came on my show when I interviewed him. We were talking about the FBA, the Foundation of Black Americans, and how, their appointed leader, he hadn't declared himself leader, but their appointed leader is none other than Tariq Nasheed. Now, he said on several occasions, I've heard him in some of his spaces, he said, listen, I'm not the leader of this, but people absolutely have propelled him and propped him up as the leader, right? They look at him as a leader. And, sometimes people don't understand that he's a businessman, he's a historian, but he's also an entertainer. He also has a character. And now people who might not be as mature, or they might not, they might be looking to cling to something, they can take his words literally and it can cause havoc, right? We saw an instance of that with Donald Trump. Just talking about somebody else, right? With President Trump, when the White House was raided, right? We saw all those people who took the words of the former president at that point, and they raided in there. So I say that to say this: I'm still critical of how we deal with people, right? In public, when you are a leader, I understand that people enjoyed seeing Donald Trump, and I do too. When you are a leader, you have to set the tone because you understand people are going to follow you. They're going to follow in however you act. It starts at the top and it rolls downhill. Attitude, emotional intelligence, I should say, all of that stuff. And President Trump absolutely has a huge following. Huge following. Even if, he has a huge support base. And so I'm always one that I like to never be the aggressor, but if I'm aggressed against, if someone aggresses me, then hey, we'll have to move in that manner. Now, I understand Rubio saying, hey, that wasn't what we agreed upon. I get it. That would cause me to be frustrated as well. But at the same time, yeah, we have to watch it. I didn't agree with the way they were raising their voices. I didn't agree with the way they were shouting them down. I can't lie to y'all. I understand the frustration, but as a leader, with all the eyes watching, we have to make sure we're diplomatic, and we have to make sure we're setting a good example. I'm not saying for Trump or any leader to be a fool. That's not it, right? Absolutely, we have to make sure that the American dollars stay in America. We have to make sure that we look at and we have our best interest at heart, number 1, 2, and 3, right? But I also understand that though there are zealots, there are times in history, there are points in history when people say certain things, when people publicly express certain sentiments, the impact that it can cause, right? I said this earlier, when Birth of a Nation was shown at the White House, right, with President Woodrow Wilson, shortly thereafter, a lot of those people, a lot of those supporters and advocates for the Ku Klux Klan, for the white supremacist groups, they now became active. it wasn't as though Woodrow Wilson told them, to become active, but they took the example and they ran with it. And that's what we do a lot of times. We don't look, listen, and observe. We don't think critically. We don't lead with logic. And so what happens is it can be catastrophic. Now, for Black people, I think that, this is, some are going to say, and they're right. Well, no, I can't say that. We are going to be impacted by this because there are a lot of brothers and sisters who are now involved in the military. We have taxes, we have fees that are going up. The price of life is getting ever more steeper, right? And so these international conflicts, whether they impact us directly at the naked level, right, where we can physically get involved, or the abstract level where it might be seen in a way that isn't so apparent at first, we will be affected. People will have to pay more if these things aren't resolved. And it sounds like either way, right? If we stay connected with Ukraine, which I think we will be, I have a good feeling they're going to make a deal. Some kind of deal is going to be made. I'm interested to see, but I think a deal is going to be made because the president said, "Hey, look, I'm willing to make a deal," right? And Zelensky has already let it be known, I'm not coming back to grovel, right? I'm not coming back to be super duper, saying thank you, sir. Just hopefully whatever's agreed upon in private can be honored in public, right? Because after that, that after seeing all the information, after hearing all the perspectives, again, I understand everybody's perspective, but I still think as the leader of a classroom of children, as a leader of a bus full of children, as a leader of players on a team, as a leader of a community, a nation, you need to always be diplomatic. And if you're going to curse somebody out, man, cut the cameras off. I'm not going to say it's not a reason to get in people's ass, because it's always a reason to get in people's ass. But as a leader, you have to now be more mindful that you have targets on your back, but you also have eyes on your actions. And so, man, I'm not for bullying or even what appears to be bullying. But now I get it. If we said we were going to talk about this and you got out there and you flipped it, I might be frustrated too. But I'll be like, you know what? Turn the cameras off. This meeting's adjourned. Meeting's over with. This guy's not serious. I'm about to go. Bye. So, but yeah, brothers and sisters, man, I wanted to show you guys that just to get a little history, let you guys get a little bit of history, let you guys read about that 100-year deal, when it happened, why it happened, and what the implications of it are. And man, just discuss that, because when I saw it, I initially was like, man, okay, I see. Yeah, heck yeah. What's wrong with you? Coming up in here, disrespect. Don't you ever. But then I said, you know what? Let me look into it, man. It's got to be more. It's got to be more to it than what we see, right? Always look deeper. It always goes deeper than what you can see. Always goes deeper than what you can see. Always, always, always. So it's good to seek out that truth so that you can have a full understanding. And to get that understanding, you need to get information from both sides, right? You don't need to engage in confirmation bias, right? Where you look for things that only substantiate what you believe. And you don't need to have cognitive dissonance, right? Where whenever you do find what you find, you don't accept it because it doesn't align with what you believe. You need to be neutral and biased and well read and well researched, because this is how you now allow yourself the ability to lead with logic. Listen, man, I've held you guys a lot longer only because I showed some clips. Man, look, I want you guys to comment up under it. Go to the comments, write what you thought. Comments, questions, or concerns. Recommendations, all of that good stuff. Praises, I take those too. Criticisms, hey, I take those too. I'm for it all, man. I'm always strategizing like my guys up here, right? Power and unity. So, yeah, man. But listen. I appreciate you guys, man. I appreciate you guys. I got more bills coming up where we expound on different topics. More interviews from wonderful brothers and sisters who have wonderful products and services. Man, I'm just I'm thankful that I can get the audience that I have. Hold, let me see. Let's see, Brother Sultan. Oh, okay. That's Sultan said, I want to push back on one point. It's POTUS, President of the United States. Most of the Republicans have been pro-Ukraine. They are afraid of him and are going along to stay in control. Hey, I understand it. I understand it. And listen, you make a legit point, Brother Farabee, because I remember, he's always had opposition from the Republicans. I remember in 2014 being back home, being in Chicago and hearing he was running. They wanted, I think it was Rubio that they wanted. Yeah, I want to say it was Mark Rubio that they wanted for the president. They weren't really behind Donald Trump. People weren't behind him. But they are now. They're behind him now. They are behind him now. And so, again, whatever it is you think about your president, whether they're conservative or liberal, look for those silver linings. Look for those opportunities to advance yourself. That's what you should do. That's what I try to do. Look at where they're going to put some money so that you can get some. Whatever it is, look into it. Yeah. But again, in 4 years, it'll all be over. But listen, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. LeadWithLogic7.com. Hats, hoodies, and tees. Y'all get behind, get the movement, let that logic stay in your brain, man. Look, as the minister Malcolm always said when he ended a talk, listen, may we all meet again in the light of understanding. Peace and love, y'all. Y'all take it easy, man.